in the show, but let's listen to our two keen observers of Malaysian politics. They are here with me, Dr. Oisin and Professor James Chin. Now, let's start with Dr. O. You just got back from Sabah after you cast your vote.
That's right.
Now, Sabah and Sarawak both are seen as stronghold states for Barisan Nasional coalition. All these years, they are the kingmakers there to ensure BN's continued hold in power. But how different are they this round? How is Sabah doing in this GE14?
Well, the parliamentary results are still coming in, but if you look at the state results so far, it would appear that almost all the so-called Chinese seats are almost gone. We are still looking at, let's say, Api and so on. But for example, a few key Chinese leaders in the state they have lost their state seats, and it would appear that if you go into the parliamentary counts, a substantial number of seats would be lost this time around from the BN side. Gained primarily by Warisan Party, by former UMNO Vice President Shafee Apdal, but also by other Harapan component parties such as DAP and PKR.
So Sabahans for Sabah, that clarion call resonates with the Sabahans this round.
I think it's not so much Sabahans for Sabah or Sabah for Sabahans. I think it's more like after perhaps more than 20 years, in fact close to a quarter century since 1994 of BN ruled, I think a lot of Sabahans are looking forward to a change. As yet, we still don't know if the Warisan / Harapan coalition can form a state government, but they have gained a substantial number of seats. But we are still waiting for the official results.
Okay. There's 25 parliamentary seats in Sabah.
Yeah, and also 66 seats. Yeah.
What about Sarawak? There's 31 seats there from Sarawak. How things changed this round?
Well, I think it's highly significant. For the very first time, Pakatan Harapan, or the opposition in general, they've managed to win several seats in Dayak majority areas. Previously, it was taken for granted that Malay, Muslim, Melanau majority areas and the Dayak areas were absolutely secure for the Barisan Nasional. But based on the reports that we've been getting, it appears that Pakatan is on track to win at a minimum of 10 seats, and it may go as high as 13 seats. In the last election, they only managed to win 6. So this is a 100% increase from 2013. Highly significant, as I mentioned. That majority seats have fallen to the opposition, but so far the Malay Muslim Melanau seat seems to be holding.
So it's an upset then in the state of Sarawak?
Oh, it's a major upset because a lot of people thought that the Sarawak Barisan Nasional was doing very well. Part of it was because the Sarawak Barisan Nasional ran a very strong Sarawak for Sarawakians campaign. Unlike Sabah, they can claim that UMNO is not around because Sarawak is the only state where there's no UMNO branches. So they were trying to distance themselves from the federal Barisan Nasional and especially UMNO. What was truly remarkable about this campaign in Sarawak was that the Sarawak party leaders were openly saying that, we're not with UMNO. But obviously, it's quite certain throughout Malaysia, not only in Sabah and Sarawak, that the UMNO brand was toxic this time. Especially Najib's brand was really, really toxic. So people who are associated with Najib UMNO really had to pay the price. And we have already seen this happening. For example, presidents of several BN component parties have already lost. And if you speak to the voters now, I suspect most of them will tell you that the reason is because we're very unhappy that even though you're the president of a BN component party, you have not spoken up about Najib's issues relating to MBB and other issues. So this is a way of sending a very strong signal that, that Barisan Nasional is not really a coalition, it's really UMNO and followers.
Well, throughout the election campaigning, the 11 days, Prime Minister Najib Razak went to Sabah twice, in fact. And he said that, throughout his 9 years in power, he has visited at least 60 times Sabah and Sarawak. It's more than Dr. Mahathir Mohamad combined in his 22 years in power. That's how much importance he places to Sabah and Sarawak. And yet, a lot of the parties are distancing themselves. Yeah. So what is happening in Sabah and Sarawak right now? Will it tilt the balance of power over here in the at the federal level?
Well, the results at the peninsula is expected to be extremely close, with Pakatan and BN each occupying almost equal number of seats. So indeed, Sabah and Sarawak, in theory, they would hold sort of the balance of power. But I think that is more attributed to Sarawak, because I think most of those seats, if there are indeed a number of seats which are won in Sabah, those are already UMNO seats. I think the other component parties of Barisan Nasional in Sabah, they will fare very badly in terms of parliamentary seats. So it will be Cham's home state of Sarawak, with those other component parties who will still gain a number of seats, who will hold perhaps the balance of power.
Can I just mention one thing? Although UMNO is in Sabah, UMNO Sabah operates on a very different vibe from UMNO in Peninsular Malaysia. The reality is that the Barisan parties in both Sabah and Sarawak have really no permanent loyalties to UMNO in Peninsular Malaysia. If the vote in Peninsular Malaysia is a cliffhanger, both sides are roughly equal in number, I suspect negotiations have already started in the background. A lot of people will tell you that Mahathir is actually toxic in Sabah and Sarawak because of his history when he was in 22 years in power and his alleged complicity in things like Project IC. But what people do not realize that, for example, because he was in power for 22 years, many of the senior leaders in Sabah and Sarawak have personal links with him. So, for example, if there's going to be any backdoor negotiations, I'll just give you an example. It is fairly obvious that Mahathir can pick up the phone anytime and speak to Taib Mahmud, who was the chief minister for most of the time, who's now the governor. He can easily pick up the phone to many of the key leaders in Sabah as well. People like Paring, who he knows for many, many years. And they can actually negotiate some sort of settlement if the contest is very, very close.
Yeah, we'll see. But let's take a look at the Peninsula Malaysia. Some of the key battleground, like Southern state of Johor. Now we are hearing unconfirmed results that it's just too close to call.
Yeah.
In fact, some of the BN component party leaders, like Dr. Subramaniam, the health minister, for example, from Sarawak, he has lost in his own 60s, and he's the president of MIC, the Malaysian Indian Congress. And we're talking about MCA as well. We talk about MCA, the Chinese Association. The president, Liao Tiong-lai, who's defending his Bentong seats. He won with just a slim majority last election, and he lost it as well. But there's unofficial results. How are you seeing what's going on in Johor State?
Well, I think Johor, in terms of Johor, the Pakatan Party, the Pakatan Coalition, is likely to win at least half, if not more, of the parliamentary seats. As to the state results, we are, as you said, still too close to call, but they are indeed with a very short shot away from forming the next state government. And you hear very similar things in many other states, in Malacca, in Negeri Sembilan, in Perak, in Kedah, and so on. While some of the Pakatan states are holding very strong, like Selangor and Penang. Yeah.
What are you hearing as far as Bentong, for example, where MCA Liao Tiong-lai is fighting for his survival right now?
I think most probably, if he wins, it will be a very, very small majority, a few hundred votes, but it is quite likely he will lose. But what is remarkable about the results is not so much that he has lost the seat. It is the fact that the leaders of Barisan component parties are losing. And my argument is that they're losing because the people, are thinking you are the presidents of Barisan component parties, and yet you kept quiet about 1MDB all this while, and you have not taken a stand against alleged corruption in government. And basically the idea is that, you keep supporting Najib, and we think UMNO's brand is toxic, and therefore we're going to punish you.
But we went on the ground. We spoke to a lot of rural voters. 1MDB, despite making headlines all over the world, doesn't gain as much traction as far as the rural voters. In fact, some of the voters in urban areas as well, they're more concerned with bread and butter GST issues. 1MDB to them, some it's difficult to understand. Others say that they just, don't see how this will affect them. But yet, you're saying that it's such a major issue as far as the outcome of these elections.
No, I think you're talking about two different things. It is probably true that they find the whole MDB saga a bit complicated to understand, especially the financial side of it. What I'm arguing is that because of scandals like 1MDB, the GST, cost of living issue, all this. These combined together collectively make the UMNO or the Barisan Nasional brand very toxic. And in Malaysia, right, we tend to associate UMNO, whether we like it or not, or individual Barisan Nasional parties with the party leaders. So Najib cannot separate his brand from UMNO, and UMNO, you cannot separate the brand from Barisan Nasional. So if your brand is toxic, it's toxic across the board.
I think we are still looking forward to results from a lot of rural constituencies. If the trend goes on like what we have seen so far, it will appear that the results are indeed very close. But those are still results mainly from constituencies with easy access and therefore easy reporting. If we can have more results from a more rural setting, I think we will have a better grasp as to whether this would indeed be a clear UMNO win, clear Harapan win, or as they say, a somewhat hung parliament. Somewhat, not exactly hung. I think there will be slightly more, one slightly more than the other. I think in the urban area, the 1MDB issue is indeed very well versed by many voters, and they can even somehow make their own conclusion from that to, for example, the rising cost of livings and so on. The rural constituents, I'm still waiting to see whether they can make that sort of connection. 1MDB, higher prices. Yeah.
And this round, we are seeing more than 80% of the seats contested are multi-corner fights, where PAS is a third force that's going to split votes for the Malays. How is that playing out? It's going to split votes for both sides. And what is your prediction? How is this going to pan out?
I think it's too early, but my prediction, in fact, Pakatan is going to win this election. And I've actually started saying that since yesterday. I think for me, right, the key thing was the speech last night by both party leaders. It was very clear, and it came across to many, many people, that Najib's final speech was about trying to give you something, a very transactional form of speech. You vote for me, I'll give you a tax break, I'll give you some more stuff here and there. But Mahathir came across more like a statesman, and he was appealing to Malay dignity and the dignity of the nation. And I think he came across quite strongly. I think for a lot of people thought that at the end of the day, Najib was getting a bit desperate. I mean, if you add on stuff that were not in your manifesto, obviously you're on the run. The most remarkable thing is like offering public holidays on the spot, which is, for lack of a better word, it sounds a bit desperate to a lot of people.
But to be fair, Dr. Mahathir also promised Thursday and Friday public holidays for Malaysians if PH were to win the election. Anyway, Dr. Oh,
I think PAS, so far, in the results announced so far, PAS's influence or so-called vote-splitting role is still very minimal. And those seats whereby we've seen, for example, some BN component parties, presidents lost and so on, they lost despite having PAS as almost like a spoiler role in their constituency. But again, I think that as we go more into the later results, into the rural results, the more prominent role to be played by PAS may come out eventually, but still we have to wait. The night is still young.
Exactly, and it's going to be a long night tonight. And I have Dr. Oisun, just came back from Sabah, and from Sarawak, Dr. James Chin joining me tonight, and it's such an honor. It's a long night. We'll keep you updated on the results as it's coming through. Right now, unofficially, it's just too close to call.